Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of AIJAC Live Online. My name is Joel Burney, and it is fantastic to have you with us this evening. We have a great program for you tonight. Just a few housekeeping items before we get to our main event tonight with Yuval. Tonight, as you'll see, that we're coming live both via Facebook and YouTube. Usually those regulars to our Zooms would have been able to ask a question directly to Yuval. However, we've changed the format a little bit. So there are three options that I quickly want to go through for you to have the ability to ask a question directly to Yuval during the Q&A in tonight's program. The first is via Facebook, which we're going live. So in the Facebook comments, you can ask a question, which I'll see. You can also log into YouTube whilst you're watching, and you can get into YouTube and comment in the YouTube by signing up as well. If that all else fails with the Facebook and the YouTube and you still want to ask a question, you can ask a question via email at events@aijac.org.au. That's events@aijac.org.au. So we will be hosting a Q&A, moderated Q&A section later on this evening. Now, ladies and gentlemen, to our main event. Ambassador Yuval Rotem is no stranger to AIJAC or our Australian audience. He's held the role of Director General of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs up until his recent retirement following an outstanding term as Israel's ambassador to Australia. Yuval had a long and distinguished career from his first posting overseas as spokesman at Israel's UN mission and consulate in New York, policy advisor and chief of staff of Israel's foreign minister, consul general in Los Angeles, ambassador to Australia and non-resident ambassador to Fiji, Papua New Guinea and New Zealand, Senior Deputy Director General in charge of public diplomacy prior to heading to the MFA in October 2016. The appointment to ambassador's rank in 2003 by the Foreign Minister Netanyahu made Yuval one of the youngest ever ambassadors to serve for the State of Israel. As MFA Director General, Yuval served directly under Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Netanyahu as Israel's senior professional diplomat, overseeing all of the MFA's diplomatic activity and operations, and leading policy formulations and engagement with the international community on the core issues at the heart of Israel's foreign relations. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure tonight to introduce the topic, which is 2022, Year of Difficulty or Opportunity for Israel. It is now my pleasure to hand over to AIJAC's Executive Director, Dr. Colin Rubenstein, to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Joel. Welcome, everybody, and in particular, welcome to our very distinguished guest of honour, Ambassador Yuval Rotem, who is so well known and respected in Australia through his service as Israel's ambassador here. And of course, we all maintained contact and watched him steer Israel's foreign relations as Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs subsequently. So who better to address the topic tonight? Israel 2022, the difficulties and opportunities. And there are plenty of difficulties on the agenda. That's normally the case, but on top of the normal lawfare and false claims of apartheid Israel and attempts to demonize Israel and even cancel it, as we know. Of course, we have the tragic events unfolding in Ukraine, the brutal criminal invasion by Russia, really becoming a pariah state on the international stage, and how this can be tempered and even resolved. And of course, in the last few days, we've seen the remarkable intervention of Prime Minister Bennett in his trip to meet with Putin, and who better to evaluate the merits and the risks in that sort of exercise than our guest of honor tonight. Israel obviously has been quite cautious and balanced in its stance towards this horrible conflict. Morally, there's no doubt what side Israel is on and needs to be on the side of the West, on the side of an independent and sovereign Ukraine. But on the other hand, through the unfolding history of the last 20, 30 years, of course, Russia has become a dominant actor in the Middle East and certainly in Israel's neighbor Syria, and the need to coordinate with Russia in taking out Israel's enemies, Iran and its various proxies and others. That's a basic existential fact of life for Israel, as our guest of honor will certainly explain tonight. But what of these meetings and the subsequent meetings of the Prime Minister Bennett with the German Chancellor and his coordination with the British and French, and obviously with Zelensky, the heroic figure in Ukraine? So if that wasn't enough, a parallel with this, of course, is the Iran issue, and we eagerly await Yuval Rotem's comments on this vexed problem. Unfortunately, we're on the precipice, perhaps, of a horrible capitulation by the United States and the JCPOA participants here to Iran. Maybe not, but this surrender, with the horrible consequences that would entail, are certainly in the forefront. And then the immediate issue of the Palestinians. What's going on there? Hamas, we know what its goal is, the Palestinian Authority. Where is it in its rivalry with Hamas and its attitude towards Israel? Opportunities, of course, the historic transformation of the Abraham Accords. And our guest of honor is right at the center of those unfolding historic Abraham Accords, which are so positive in their reality and in their future implications. And we eagerly await your comments on whether they can be expanded and how viable they are and what's happening on that front. And the basic questions, amongst many, many others, about how Israel and US relations under President Biden in particular, in the new circumstances, are faring. Where's that all heading? And we want to know, of course, about Israel and Australia and Israel and Asia, where you devoted so much skillful attention over the years. Yuval, welcome. Please give us your views. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Joel, for inviting me to come to this webinar. I first of all would like to congratulate our new ambassador to Australia, Amir Maimon. Amir was a very good former colleague of mine. I think that you are very lucky to have a very seasoned diplomat with a great understanding and experience. Amir has traveled extensively and served overseas many places. He is the inaugural ambassador of Israel to Lithuania. And I think that he comes to Australia in a very important time. And I guess that you're all going to enjoy working with him. So I want just to wish him good luck and basically would like you to embrace him as you embraced me when I came to Australia almost 15 years ago. Second, I want to express my gratitude to AIJAC for the commitment, to the devotion, and to the energy that they have projected throughout many years of working on behalf of the Jewish people and the support of Israel, and particularly to Colin Rubinstein, an amazing person individually, but also an amazing advocate for Jewish causes and for Israeli policy. So I thank you, Colin, for all what you have done on Israel. When, Colin, you have approached me about 3 weeks ago to do this webinar, I thought to have a certain idea, what should I say and what should I tell the people who are basically watching me. But I think that we all need to acknowledge that on February 24th, something very dramatic has happened. And from that on, many elements are going to unfold. And that means that the elements that we have thought to talk about in a certain way, some of them are completely invalid. Some of them are even not on the agenda anymore. So I think when we need to provide some observation and to provide some prediction in a wartime era, first of all, we need to be more humble in the way we say our things. And second, to understand that many of the elements that we talked about are still unknown. And it's going to be very difficult to connect the dots and to provide a certain landscape of what kind of future we're all going to experience in the short term, medium term, and the long term. So let me just say few things which I believe are very relevant to the crisis in Ukraine. And I think that we all need to understand that there is a lot already to learn after 12 days of this conflict. I'm very mindful that I'm on record here, so I definitely not to try to having headlines in terms of the prediction, but I definitely try to be stay interesting on some of the standpoint which I'm going to share with you. So I think that the third thing which I want to say that if we want to keep a certain degree of the world order, that the one that we have known so far, a discontinuation of the war is essential. If we are going to let this war move forward and we are going to experience more escalation in this region, there are going to be more significant changes unfolding, and the elements and the architecture that we have known in Europe is definitely going to be different. So this is, I think, one element to understand that if we are not going to be able to succeed in stopping the war in the next few days, the days ahead and the weeks ahead are going to be extremely difficult, not just to experience, also to watch on the screen. I think that it's important to say something else, that this war or this conflict is not about political misunderstanding, or it's not about a security immediate concern. It's more about historical, psychological element in which the Russian Federation seem to like to have its own wings over Ukraine. For Russia, Ukraine has been always the cradle of the Russian, I say, birth. If we understand the history of Kiev, we understand what Prince Vladimir has built in Kiev. This is where the Russian nation has actually emerged. So for them, Kiev is something very deep, very strong, very important in historical term, and definitely in geostrategic term. This war can be stopped by one man decision, and we all know how to spell his name. And I think that we all need to understand too that the war doesn't seem to work out the way it was planned. For us, as I say, those of us who are living afar, we need to understand and to acknowledge that this is mega event definitely going to change the architecture and the order that we have known. This is by far the most important strategic historical event since the end of the Cold War. I think that when Israel has met this crisis, I think that we need to say that strategically we have seen this landscape with some degree of uncertainty. The projection of power by Washington, I think, has been undermined in the Middle East region, and it was manifested by the withdrawal from Afghanistan and the passivity in the Battle of the Gulf. And above all, for Israel, it's the return to JCPOA, and the Ukraine crisis does not contradict this direction. And I think that we understand, as a country that was part always with this club of nations associated with Washington, that every time Washington is challenged politically or strategically by anyone, it's basically have consequences also for a country like Israel. And I think that one element that we have seen in the last few weeks in different areas is that the West cannot prevent the unfolding outcome through the singular use of diplomatic or economic means without evaluation the option of a display of hard power. It's a very, I think, important lesson also for the future, because one of the lessons that small countries or weak countries are going to draw from this crisis is that when the big and the strong countries have an appetite to take over, you need to rely on your own independent capabilities. And one of the outcomes that we're most likely going to see from this crisis is that either you find new alliances with other countries, or you're going to try to move into an arm race in order to be able to have your own capabilities in the moment of truth. Because one of the lessons that we have seen from Ukraine and Russia is that the West doesn't have a tendency to intervene while others are going through a conflict. And that means that in moment of truth, in moment of conflict, it is likely that you might stay on your own, especially if you are weaker, especially if you are the smaller side of the equation. And I say that because Ukraine is actually on the footstep of the doorstep of Europe. So if it didn't happen in Europe, it is very difficult to conceive that it's going to take place in other places. I think that at this moment, when we talk about opportunities and difficulties, we have to understand, at least for the next few days and few weeks, this crisis is going to dominate the entire agenda. So anything else is going to be pushed further south in terms of international attention, or the media attention, or the public attention. So issues like the Palestinians, or issue like the war in Ethiopia, or the decision by Ethiopia to start dealing with filling the dam that basically going to prevent water all the way go to the Nile. I mean, issues that have been so much part of this neighborhood or this region that I'm talking about, North Africa, Middle East, Gulf, these issues are going to be now on the sideline, at least for a time being, because this crisis in Europe, it is likely going to shape a new architecture of a world order that no one can predict at this stage what's going to be the outcome. So not just to be humble, but you're going to see a lot of decision making waiting on the sideline until parameters are going to be more relevant, at least in the near future, before they're going to move forward in terms of decision making. I just want to say a few things about what you see on the screen and in the newspaper. When we judge what we see, we have to understand that most of the images that you see are coming from the Ukraine territories, and many of the briefing that we see in the American press or in the Western press are coming from intelligence resources of the West. And we need to understand that some of that can be biased, some of them can be less objective, and I don't think that we have a good, clear-cut understanding how this military campaign is moving on. I just want to make sure that we understand that that this is the story. When we talked about some of the elements that we see that it doesn't going according to the plan, I just want to remind our friends in the audience that it took America in 2003 to take over Iraq a bit over 3 weeks. And Iraq did not display the same resistance like the Ukraine. It didn't have the same stamina. They didn't have the same resilience of the people of Ukraine, the very one that we salute at this stage. But in terms of militarily, the size of Ukraine, this is the biggest country in Europe, but Russia, it is going to be a very significant military operation. So this is day 12 of the war. And just having in mind that 20 years ago in Iraq, it was well over 3 weeks for the American to take over. So we need to have a little bit of proportion here with this respect. I don't want to touch the issue why this war actually took place in the winter, with the mud, with the snow, with the cold. Interesting story that one day we need to understand. Militarily, when we judge it, I think that I don't want to be too harsh in my observation, but I think that the fate of Ukraine has been decided, militarily at least. What may take place after that? Most likely we are going to see, as we have seen in the past, it's just prediction and it's just personal. This has nothing to do with intelligence, has nothing to do with facts that I have. But when you try to understand the way out of this crisis, one way to see that is that election is most likely going to be called. A more pro-Russians regime is going to emerge. It is likely that this pro-Russian government is going to ask for troops from Russia to stay on the ground and to protect Ukraine from future adversaries. And this is likely scenario that can take place with some kind of understanding that Crimea is a element that was taking over in 2014, and maybe some more land bridge between Crimea and the east border of Russia can going to get connected with some extra territory to be hand over to Russia. It's all speculation, but if you want to understand a way out of this conflict, this is if Ukraine is going to be taking over. This is a scenario that likely we are going to see in the next few weeks. And again, with respect to the West, which is my concern, which is basically the way we look at that. Again, you see that the war was not stopped. The invasion took place. Diplomatic means on its own has its own weakness. Economic sanction has a role to play, but it doesn't necessarily stop the war. And it's interesting to think what should be the means at our disposal if we would like to avoid a future crisis. It is definitely, especially when it comes to this element, it's definitely going to be definitely a moment that we all need to understand deeply in what way you can still advance and pursue your own interest, because this war brings two elements that we need to factor in the way we do our own business. One is the interest of each of the country, and second is the moral aspect of each country. And not always they go hand in hand. And for many countries, it's a very difficult dilemma. But I think that there are moments in history, there are moments in the political life that decision is made not necessarily based exclusively on interest. And in Israel's case, it's a small country. that have been always in dilemma, always in moment of difficulty in this decision making, and given the fact that we have many issues at our hand, from the fact that we are bordering with Russia up north, with the fact that America is our best ally for quite a while, and we rely on them on many issues and on many moments of truth, and the fact that we have Jewish communities in Ukraine and in Russia, this dilemma, as far as you have seen in the first days, have been surface to the extent that we knew that it is not going to be an easy decision making. What you've seen also in the last few days is some efforts of Israel to see if there is a way we could contribute to some extent to bring some kind of accommodation between Russia and Ukraine. It's always a question whether a small country like Israel should intervene. But I think that over here there's a window here, because since we are not part of the West, Europe, we are not part of the Western European countries, we might have a different role to play by providing messages from one side to another. It's a different when President of France or Prime Minister or Chancellor of Germany taking upon themselves the role of mediation. For a small country who I think has to begin with a very humble aspiration, I think that providing some messages from side to side, it's an interesting experience. It also entails a great deal of risk, because once you are in this corridor, we might be in position that eventually one of the sides is going to be unhappy with our role. So I think today is also another important meeting in Latvia, when our foreign minister, Mr. Lapid, is getting together with the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken. If we are going, I think let's put it that way. If we are not going to hear reservation from the American side, you might see a further steps by Israel to go on with these kinds of approach of helping, of facilitating some mediation, but up to a certain degree, of course. But if we are going to sense that America is a bit unhappy with this role, I think you're not going to see any further steps. I say that because so far the State Department did not make any comments about the Prime Minister travel to Moscow and the exchange of messages that we have with some European leaders. Lack of replies also didn't say that it's not good. But this is why the meeting today in Latvia is important between the two foreign ministers, that to get a better feeling directly from the American, whether this is something that they would like us to pursue further, or this is enough for this. I can go on and talking about this war because it's pretty complicated, but I will say just one last thing. One is that I'm worried about arm race, significantly arm race all over the world, because the decision between to take over or being taken over, no one wants to be taking over. And the fact that we have seen this difficulty for the West to intervene in certain manner means that many small countries may have reconsidering their point of view. We were felt very comfortable in the last 20, 30, 40 years to allocate very, I would say, limited amount of our GDP to security expenditure. Many countries have used under the 2%. I think you're going to see a very significant change in the next few days and few weeks and few months. Many of the countries' budget is going to scale up their percentage of security budget, and that's going to be, of course, paid by all kinds of welfare, health, education budget. This is a big shift in direction of many small countries and many other countries that would like to make sure that they are beef up their own capabilities. And another element, which I think is should be troubling, that it's going to be by far more complicated to find area of cooperation between countries, because there is going to be, to some degree, a sentiments of nationalism in some places, in some countries, which I think that are going to, I don't want to say interrupt, but definitely disrupt some of those area of cooperation that is so essential for us to save not just, I would say, save the planet, but definitely having some WTO cooperation as was manifested during the ability to find, let's say, a vaccination for the corona within 1 year, which is, I think, one of the most amazing accomplishment of us as human, that we were able to overcome this disease or pandemic within a year or two in this certain way. So it's difficult to be optimist, but I think that this difficulty of this moment and the change that we're all going to experience may provide some new alignment of forces to be able to cope with this new reality. And we need to be a little bit more flexible and more fluid in the way we pursue our own policy in the next, I would say, in the next few weeks. Not to fix a policy, but to be more fluid and to understand what is basically at stake here. Each country on its own, and the small countries particularly learning from the lesson of Ukraine. So I just want to stop here with your permission, because I don't want to go on with this. I want to say a few elements about Iran. Yes, Joel. It's okay to continue?
All good. Keep going. Keep going. Absolutely.
Okay,
Keep going.
okay. I just want to say a few things about Iran, which I prepared. I didn't want to go into too complicated analysis, but I will say the following. The deal is not yet sealed. We might be days before or weeks before, but if I try to analyze the press and the leak that we have from this discussion, I will say with your permission, a few observations. According to the press, the deal is coming soon. From the Israeli perspective, it's going to be pretty bad. I will say that a line that that may not surprise you, but I try to put it in a reasonable way. America is not going to live up to what they have claimed the deal is going to be. The deal is not going to be better, because it's not going to be longer as stronger as they have promised. My view is that the deal that is coming will be rather shorter and weaker. And I will go even further to say that it's almost a complete capitulation to the demands from Iran, to the extent that Iran can shorten its breakout time to a mere handful of months. I think we have tried, when you try to analyze what took place, I think that it's important to say that we have tried two different approaches with the American over this issue. Previously, we were willing to engage the administration publicly, openly, to express to express to the administration our reservation about the GCPOA. And I think it turned out that we were unable to get a fair hearing at that time. The new government strategy was to avoid any confrontation with administration, and yet the same results. Both confrontation and dialogue yield the same outcome. Iran, I think, may perceive to discontinue enrichment according to the deal, but it is less important in 2022 since they were able to gain the knowledge and they procure the equipment to enrich the uranium at a higher speed. For almost non-existent concession from Iran, American negotiators are willing to give everything, unfreezing billions of dollars from the banking accounts, exporting oil and energy, an elimination of sanction, and no engagement at all with the other stages of Iranian military nuclear capabilities. It is also unbelievable that even members of the American team who are associated with the chief negotiator, Rob Malley, resigned at the end of January, citing exaggerated American concessions. So one must remember that the return to the GCPOA, as it means that within a few years, all the restrictions formally in place will expire beginning next year. And Iran will have no restriction whatsoever in the near future to produce nuclear capabilities. I think if that's going to take place, this is very bad news, not just for Israel, but for all the neighboring countries. Because if you look at the debate we have in 2015, we basically are repeating most of the arguments in 2022 and 2021. And for all of us who live in this region, I think that we have experienced what was the outcome of 2015. One thing for sure, there will be no more stability in the region once the deal is signed. That was the case in 2015, because if you compare the notes and the statement of President Obama and the former Minister of the European Union, Federica Mogherini, what they said in 2015 and what Israel stated in 2015, you compare the notes and see who was right and who was wrong. So in the aftermath of the deal, provided it's going to sign, I think you're going to see over here by far more uncertainty and by far more instability. And this difficulty that we're all going to experience in the region is going to provide some new inputs to some countries in the region in terms of how we're going to deal with these difficulties. And I think this may lead us to some new opportunities of realignments of forces, exactly what you have seen as the outcome of the 2015 agreement, which was eventually the Abraham Accords. The fear from Iran, the lack of trust with Iran, what they have done since 2015 in terms of new capabilities of drones, of precision striking missiles. You already have a test in the last few weeks when Iran-backed militia, the Houthi, in Yemen, fire rockets and missiles over Saudi Arabia, over the Emirates. And there was not really a punishment. There was not really a consequences. There was not really a restriction or element that you have seen that have tried to push back this approach by the Houthi, who is backed by Iran, by using these conventional weapons at this moment of negotiation. So when the negotiations are going to be over, you can imagine to what degree they are going to dare to pursue it even further, given all the new billions of dollars they are going to have in their account and the ability of exporting oil and gas. By the way, today, the new price of a barrel is $140, which means 14 years record. And you can imagine what kind of income that's going to provide the Iranian regime that we all know, in the end of the day, what they're up to. I am talking way too much, and I'm sorry about that. I was not really calculating my time with this respect, but I will just mention one thing, with your respect, Joel. We have on Thursday an important visit of our president to Turkey. What happened to Turkey is an example of a change of policy in the foreign affairs. The country that I think medium-sized power in the region, he's actually taking some steps towards reconciliation with some of the countries that have been they were unfriendly with Turkey in the last few years. The Emirati were the first one. We are now the second one online. I guess that Egypt and Saudi Arabia are going to do remaining countries. And that's going to, I think, complete a circle of change with respect to Turkey. And I think that you're going to see more of these kinds of changes in the region, realizing what is basically at stake and who should be on your side in moment of truth. So I stop here, but it's important for me just to mention that, because that's going to be a very significant visit of Israel president as a head of the state in Turkey on Thursday.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Yuval. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just a recap for the facilitation of the question and answers tonight. You have 3 options to ask a question, and I can see some of them are coming in already. You can post a question in the comment section of Facebook or in the comment section of YouTube, or you can email at events@aijac.org.au. I'm now going to try and flip to Colin. Colin, you there? No. Colin's just ducked out. He is having some technical difficulties. So what I will do is I will start off with the first question. Now, keeping in your last point, when you were talking optimistically about the Abraham Accords, and in terms of what's gone on with the Abraham Accords in connection with the crisis in Ukraine, how significant was it that Israel apparently successfully lobbied the Emiratis, the UAE, to vote in favor of the UN General Assembly motion condemning Russia after it abstained in the Security Council? Does that tell us anything about the state of the Abraham Accords?
Well, I'm not so sure about this information about Israel engagement and convince the Emirati to abstain in the United Nations Security Council. The Emirati representing the Arabs in the Security Council. That is the notion. There's always one Arab country sitting on the Security Council. This is basically representing the overall view of this mechanism. Israel definitely has a role to play, but I think in the end of the day, it was the decision making of the Emirati what is basically serve their own interest, not so much what serve Israel interest. So I think that to some extent we would like sometime to believe or leak to the press that we have a role to play. But I have, from my own experience in diplomacy, and I do have some experience, in the end of the day, the vote in a Security Council is basically a pure calculation of the country that's sitting there in this room, not serving other countries' interest.
Thank you, Yuval. Now I'm just going to try Colin again to see if we can get you. Colin, you're there. I can see you now.
I'm here. I'm having some difficulty. I'm sorry, but
That's all right. Go for it, Colin.
I will. I'll be succinct and just one big one. So Yuval, you've brilliantly sort of preempted a lot of the questions by explaining on the Ukraine issue the dilemma, the horns of the dilemma that Israel is on in terms of the balancing act that it must undertake, and the risks inherent in the Prime Minister's Bennett's mediation attempts, bold as they certainly are. I'm just wondering if you could maybe just assess how you think this is all working out for Israel, and any advice as to how Israel should be responding going forward. That's one. I'm going to ask the second one too, because I may be cut off. On the Iran issue, the capitulation is around the corner, as you've said, with all the dire consequences that you've elaborated. If that unfortunately is the case, as appears increasingly likely, how and should Israel really react to those circumstances? Two big ones, I know, but I'm sure you can.
But let me just say about the first one. To step into this corridor of mediation and dealing with a superpower like Russia, as I say, the most important virtue is to stay humble. It is said that we're working closely with Germany on this issue. I think that, hello?
We've got you. It's all good. I can hear you.
You hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Hello?
Yuval,
Because I don't see you anymore. You see me?
Can you see me? I can see you. No problem.
You see me?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, I will open it again. Just a second.
We can definitely
Sorry
hear you.
about that.
We can definitely see you.
Okay, so I will continue. Okay, so even if I don't see you anymore.
Okay.
I think that what is important here that if we continue this service, I think that the main element on our side is that we are small enough. We are not sitting in the Security Council. We are not Western European big power. So I think that many countries may not associate us with these kinds of bloc of nations, and not being, pure European nation, to some extent give us an edge just to provide some service. Turkey does the same thing in a way. They try to do it before the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. So suddenly, non-typical mediators are trying to step in terms of providing service to everyone else. The question is that we need to know that this service is welcomed, because otherwise some may be unhappy with this service, and Israel cannot take the risk of providing service that it's unwanted. I think that I hope that that this is an element which I have to say that this is a pure diplomatic efforts. This is not about projection of power. It's not about projection of medium-sized power country like Israel. It's about unique position in a certain time to provide this element to those countries who would like to see an end of this war. Second, about Iran, Colin, it's a difficult to understand fully what is taking place here. When Trump withdrew from the deal back in 2018, it was interesting because many of the countries in the neighborhood were so unhappy with this decision. But European countries like, sorry, I just want to change it. Many of the countries in the region were willing to embrace this decision of Donald Trump as president. European countries, those who participated in the 2015 accords, they were unhappy with this decision. Look at the reservation that the countries over here in the region are basically looking towards this idea that the deal might be signed in the next few days. It's interesting because it's the only time, at least you can sense, that Russia and America are working from the same side of the equation. On any other issue, Russia and America don't agree, especially not now. But on that issue, they're still on the same side. Now, what Israel can do? Israel can do a lot. First of all, we need to demand. You hear me?
Yes, Yuval, we can hear you.
Hello?
Yuval, we can hear
Because I
you.
don't see pictures. So
It's okay, we can hear you. Keep going,
Okay.
not a problem.
Okay. So I just want to say this. I missed the point here. Sorry. The story of we need to make sure that inspection is going to be fully implemented by the superpowers who basically going forward with this deal. If there will be no inspection, it's going to be an interesting story. How can you verify that Iranians live up to the commitments? Second, when you're going to ask the CIA to inspect that Iranians live up to its commitment, what if Iran is going to have a breach of this agreement? The CIA director is going to submit this fact to the president, because that means that America was cheated by Iran. So even this inspection, I have to say that there's a difficulty here. Who does the inspection and how reliable is going to be the inspection? Something to think about in terms of how to deal with this. Second, it's going to give us short few years, to consider what next for us. Whether we are going to have further alignments with more countries in the region. All of them are threatened directly by Iran, or we are going to do some more steps on our own in terms of having some options on the table for the future. But I think that no decision of this manner has been done yet or made yet. We're waiting for the American to get some reports. Listen, no one actually has any paper so far about what the deal is going to be like. It's all about press leakage. We don't have information. It's basically going under the radar so far. So we all have to wait before we're going to make a formal statement about Iran. But it's definitely huge event, very disturbing, not just for Israel, but every single country in this neighborhood that have been threatened already by Iran.
Thank you, Yuval. I have a question sort of attached to that. Another country close to Israel's border where Iran is certainly present, and that's from a great friend of AIJAC, and I'm sure of yours as well. Dr. Mike Kelly asks, I wonder what the view in Israel is of the risks that might emerge from Syria in relation to the Russian overlord there.
Well, if Russia is on the winning side, Syria may get a sense that they may move with some tactical or strategic steps into a more formal consolidation of the land that is under their control. But Syria is a country of many militias and a country of many interests. And this is not just about, Bashar al-Assad. You have at least few countries that have a very deep interest, and every small step by one of them can trigger the other one either to counter the step or to intervene in by far more meaningful way. So what I mean by that if you have Turkey taking a big chunk of the land on the north of Syria, you have Iran presence on the ground in Syria, you have Russia, you have Israel interest to avoid the entrenchment of Iran in Syria. So Syria is a small country with many conflicting interests of different countries. And I think that if there is a way for Bashar al-Assad to gain some legitimacy is by using this crisis and helping Russia to push out or to roll out or to roll back Iran from Syria. Every place you have Iran, it's a recipe for instability. So if you in position to use this crisis to gain a bit of legitimacy and to roll back the presence of Iran in Syria, that might be one of very few positive dimensions that can come out of this crisis. But I don't see that, not at this stage.
Thank you, Yuval. Now, talking about other actors in the region, I've got a question here from Alex Goodman about China. Now, we all know how important China is in the region. How will Israel manage the China relationship? And how do you see China vis-a-vis threats in our region in the aftermath of the Ukrainian invasion?
Well, China is not yet a very active player in the region. They have their own interest. I think it's a solid interest that we have experienced for so many years. We have seen it with energy. And I think this element of interest is still there and even stronger. So China is engaging with many of the countries in the region, in Iran, in the Emirati, with the Saudis, with everyone. So this is one element. Second, we manage this relationship in a reasonable way. I mean, engagement is there, exchange of trade, commercial activities, tourism. I mean, forget about the corona, but before that, it's definitely there. I think that we have seen some degree of pressure by the American to limit some of this connection. But I think that so far, we understand the American area of interest, but we definitely understand also that China is too big to ignore, too big to write off. And I think that you have seen that China turned to be our second trade partner about a year and a half ago. They have been very, I think, engaging in many of the areas. What is going to take place in your region, it's difficult to know. But I just want to raise with you an element that is important to just to think about, just to contemplate with, because what we have seen with Russia and Ukraine, that Russia has basically tried to bring about the buffer zone for Russia in the western border of Russia. Georgia, Ukraine. It was interesting to see this development in this concept that Russia is basically trying to build some degree of buffer land between NATO and with Russia. But what if Russia succeeds? And what if Russia is going to decide to go downwards? And that's basically going to touch some of the countries in Central Asia. Kazakhstan, as far as you remember, Russia stepped into Kazakhstan only about a few weeks ago, supporting Tokayev, the president of Kazakhstan, in a very significant way and stabilized the regime and the country. What if Russia moved forward into the south? Because this is the area when China has tried to have more area of influence with the Belt and Road approach that they're going to pursue. So that's going to be interesting to see if Russia is going to move into this direction, because that's almost guarantee to some degree some engagement with China, but from a I think from a point that we haven't seen before, because that was Russia. China has a great interest in this area from their own interest. At this stage, the only way for Russia to move away a bit from the sanction is to ally themselves more with China. I think that you have seen yesterday that all those cards, the credit cards, MasterCards, Visa cards, that discontinue to operate anymore in Moscow. The Russians basically start using the Chinese credit card. So the more Russia is going to rely on China, it's going to consolidate a very important outcome of this crisis, that Russia may be from now on the junior part of the Sino-Russia duel. I think it's an interesting twist that was not expected to take place because of the war, but it was gradually supposed to take place because of the size of the economy. China is number 2 in the world. Russia is number 11 in the world. So the relationship has been going to be less symmetric and more asymmetric, but the war or the crisis in Ukraine is basically taking this relationship into this position that consolidate that Russia is more junior partner with China than what we have seen before.
Today, Yuval, now we have gone over the 60-minute mark, but if you will indulge us for another 10 minutes, I have a few questions for you, and I will let you know that the audience is still large and they're still entertained, so they're hanging on. So if you're okay for another few questions, I wouldn't mind asking.
I'm okay. I just want to know that technically I don't see any picture. It's okay, but I'm
Right, so you're good. We can all see you. We can hear you perfectly. It's all working on our end. So we'll just bear with it for another 10 minutes or so. Now, I've got another question in the chat here from Michael Eason. Good to hear you concerning the Ukraine, Russia, and Israel's role. What do you think the impact of the conflict will be in Hungary in their elections, and in Turkey trade sanctions and Turkish compliance? Now, I will add to that, you did touch on the imminent visit of President Herzog to Turkey. So whilst we're attaching a question to Turkey, can you give us a few extra words as to what the intermediate aims of both the Israeli government and the Turkish government is in revitalizing and reinvigorating their relationship?
Okay, first of all, we have to say something about Hungary and Poland and all those countries that basically located on the border of Ukraine. We have 1.5 million refugees in 11 days of a war. If this war is going to further escalate it, we might see 3, 4, even 5 million refugees in a very short time. This is a catastrophe on its own right to deal with and to address it. I want to say that the war in Syria has produced more than 1 million refugees in 10 years. And we have seen a very different approach by some European countries to this crisis. This is not for me to judge and to provide and to pass a judgment on this circle. I just want to mention that because it's going to be part of the discussion in the aftermath of this war. I mean, having in mind that non-Christian, non-white people step into the border, and they were basically rejected. This is not an easy question. Every country has its own calculation. Again, I'm not passing a judgment. I just want to bring this issue and to surface that because it's an interesting element that we don't discuss it in a way. But 1.5 million refugees to be absorbed by the neighboring country in 11, 12 days, it's an amazing effort. And I guess that it's amazing effort for all the European Union, but particularly for these countries. I'm not so sure that this introduction of refugees into Hungary in such a number is going to change Viktor Orban's fate in the election. I don't want to say the contrary, but this idea that you basically reach out to people on your border in time of need, it's a gesture or it's an effort that can also get rewarded by the people, not just get a sense that this is not what they wanted to see. Remember, at the end of the day, it's have a lot of similarities and commonalities. So this is not something that's supposed to disturb the political campaign in Hungary that is taking place now until election is supposed to be, if I'm not mistaken, early April. With respect to the other question, I don't remember that. What is the other question?
Turkey about not just the short term, but the intermediate term.
Turkey. Well, listen, Turkey's evolution. I think it's a welcoming evolution. The relationship are going up and downs in the last 12 years. We are now more on the up, but in 2018 we were down. Question is how many more cycles we are going to experience until we are going to get more stability into this relationship. Israel and Turkey has a lot to cooperate, but I think since 2010 we also have acknowledged that Cyprus and Greece tend to be our strategic partners. I think the very fact that President Herzog traveled to Athens and to Nicosia, to Greece and Cyprus, before he traveled to Turkey, it is not just a gesture diplomatically, it's also a political statement on our side that, unrelated to what may unfold with Turkey, Greece and Cyprus remain our allies, friends, and strategic partners. And the more we can all do together in this region, I think we're all going to be better off in terms of addressing all those difficulties that we have in this neighborhood. And also the opportunities that are still lay ahead, especially on this energy sector that is so critical, especially now and today for Europe. So if, with all the means that at our disposal, looking for to see if the current supplier can increase the input, if we can move to more renewable energy, all this is basically very much intact. But the idea that we can have new suppliers of energy, particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean basin, that can be an interesting development. And if we are going to be to cultivate the ground for all the countries in that area, I think that with time and patience and trust that is going to build on this visit of President Herzog to Turkey, we might see, hopefully, a better landscape in this region.
Toda, Yuval. Now, I'm going to be very cheeky. I'm going to ask you two very quick fire questions that could have a very, very big answer, but we are pressed for time. It's a good segue because you were just talking about energy. And as you would know, Joe Biden recently withdrew his support for the EastMed pipeline project collaboration between Israel, Greece, and Cyprus. Overall, and I know again it's very not fair of you to ask such a broad question for such a short answer, but in the context of that and everything else that we've discussed tonight, JCPOA and the issues that are going on in Europe, what have you thought of the Biden administration's performance in the Middle East, and how do you see the U.S.-Israel relationship developing this year? I told you, Yuval, I did apologize before.
I need just a webinar. Just a webinar just for that. Listen, it's America engagement in the Middle East is critical for stability in the Middle East. Period. Okay. If America wants to withdraw from the Middle East, it's a recipe for instability. I think that for everyone here, when I say engage, doesn't have to be boots on the ground. It can be in a very different version. It can be with a lot of cooperation, bilaterally and regionally. But America in the Middle East is critical for stability and for certainty. If we are not going to have these elements, many countries are going to ask many questions and may go into a corridor of miscalculation in terms of understanding the other countries in the region. So this is going to be my penny for this discussion. Listen. It's unfair for any country in the region to pass judgment on the American. I mean, we have one thing in mind. We want America to succeed. We want to see the well-being of America, because the more America strong, when America is stronger, we are stronger, and we have a stake in the well-being of America. So we all need to contribute to some extent to its well-being. But the one thing we need to know, that if they are not going to be in the region, if they are going to be less engaged, we may see more uncertainty and more instability. And the outcome is obvious.
Thank you, Yuval. No, you did very well on that. And again, apologies for asking you such a broad question for such a short answer. My final question is a positive one, even though the atmospherics of Israel's embassy participation with the Sydney Festival had caused some issues down under, which was a bit of a rocky start to 2022. Most importantly, how would you like to see Australia's relationship with Israel progress in 2022? And I would just say that I have a nice comment from someone in the Facebook chat asking, are you planning to set up a direct flight between Australia and Israel soon?
Well, I was the Director General of the Foreign Ministry that I have been able to facilitate first direct flights from Tel Aviv to Melbourne to rescue Israelis, backpackers primarily, who wanted to be back to Israel during the Corona. So first flight was already taking place and with great success. So I think it's feasible. Airplanes are now can do this distance, and the more direct flights we are going to have, I think the more ability we are going to have business-wise to improve and to enhance this relationship. It's also going to shorten significantly the psychological barrier, and with the introduction of the Dubai and the Abu Dhabi as the two hubs for Israel to travel, it's also shortening significantly the distance to Australia. This was not something in my time, but we have it now. And I think that this is going to be ease to some extent the pain to travel from Australia to Tel Aviv and vice versa. I have just want to say that Israel has done magnificently in 2021. The growth of Israeli economy was in the neighborhood of 8% in 2021. Israel is now a country that is almost $500 billion economy. We moved to either number 28 or number 29 in the index of the biggest economies in the world of the IMF. So I think it's time for Australia and to Israel to realize there's a lot to be done in terms of cooperation in the near future. We still, trade-wise, we're still in the neighborhood of $1 billion. We can do by far more, definitely in this era of challenge that we are going to face. And with the world changing in our own eyes, I think that when I talk about new alignments, it's not just new alignments militarily and politically. It's basically also commercially. And I think that reaching out to new markets and to work together strongly politically with other countries will be a very significant element to be continued to pursue, especially when more clouds are gathering over the sky.
It's a great way to end off, Yuval. Thank you very much for that. And I actually hope to take advantage of that shorter flight via Dubai when I fly out to Israel on Thursday morning. So thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Colin for the vote of thanks.
Welcome.
Analysis, as expected. As you've said, you've given us some very sobering thoughts about the shocking Ukraine crisis and the ramifications. But your concluding comments about the centrality, the importance of US engagement in the Middle East, of course, absolutely applies in our part of the world and the Asia Pacific as well. And I think we all recall President Reagan's comment that the best way to achieve peace is through strength, and your emphasis on the importance of hard power, as well as, of course, doing the right thing and morality. Twinning the two perspectives and interests are crucial in the way ahead. And your concluding comment about how pivotal Australia-Israel relations are and how much scope there is for enhanced ties between the two countries, particularly in the security and the economy space. And of course, you, as much as anybody else, contributed so much to the strengthening of those ties through the years.
Thank you.
So to conclude, as we absolutely expected, given your skillful presentation, a combination of your knowledge and tremendous experience and contribution to the well-being of Israel, you presented us with extraordinary sort of insights, fascinating analysis. We're very much in your debt. Thank you very much on behalf of everybody watching.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for tonight. Another great episode of AIJAC Live Online. Thank you very much, Yuval, for staying on for a little bit extra. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for staying on the line as well. We look forward to catching up with you soon. There will be an invitation for our next webinar in your inbox shortly. But for now, stay healthy and bye for now.